welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever. Today is Monday, January 5th, and it is our great pleasure and honor and privilege to have with us today State Representative Jim Harrison. He represents a district from Rutland County, Rutland 11 to be precise. That includes the towns of Chittenden, Killington, Mendon, and Pittsfield. And Jim is going to be stepping down from the Statehouse tomorrow, January 6th. I am highly confident that he will be greatly missed around the Statehouse. Before he became a state representative, he was the president of the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association, a position he held until 2016, and has been a member of the House of Representatives up in Montpelier from 2017 on until today. So, Jim, I should say Representative Harrison, welcome to GNAT-TV.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I'm pleased to be here, and you don't need to use the title representative anymore because I'm in my final hours of
well, I figured I better get it in while I still have the chance to do that. Anyway, great to have you with us. And I'll just say at the start, before we kind of get into a few questions, I remember meeting you, I guess it would have been in 2017 or 2018 in one of my trips up to Montpelier, and a couple of times afterwards, and I always found you to be one of the friendliest, most interesting state representatives to talk to. You always seem to be, someone, someone like me could walk up to and have a conversation and learn something from. And that was very pleasant. And I think it's safe to say you're going to be very missed around the State House.
Well, I appreciate that, Andrew. It's life's too short, and if you don't enjoy what you're doing, don't do it. Move on to find something else. And I have been blessed to spend a number of years at the State House, both advocating for retailers, but obviously most recently in the last 8 or 9 years as a state representative. And I won't say I enjoyed every minute of it, but I've enjoyed the time and the service immensely. It's democracy at work, and we may not all agree on different issues that come up, but it's important that we all can get along and we can all smile and have a little fun along the way.
Absolutely, that's important. And I should have mentioned at the start that you also were the vice chair of the House Appropriations Committee, a very important post up in the State House, a very important committee, and that's you leave big shoes to fill, I think. But your comments there about the importance of getting along and having fun with what you're doing. Well, what more can you say? That matters.
It does matter, and unlike what you perhaps hear in the press about Washington, I think in Vermont, again, we have a wide divergence of opinions, but we get along. We really do get along. You can sit down in the cafeteria with anybody, and just to give you a case in point, in Appropriations Committee, we've had a little ritual for the last couple of years that before we start our business of the day and start taking testimony, someone will tell a joke or a riddle. And it just breaks the ice, gets us going, especially if it's a riddle. What does that mean? And try to look at the angle and move on and get a laugh, that's all.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a good ritual to me. Probably a few other committees ought to do the same thing. Well, anyway, that leads me, I guess, to my first question. I just was going to throw out to you the obvious one, I guess. What prompted your decision to retire from the State House at this point? Because you're midway through a term. There's still one more year on your term, and the governor has appointed a replacement to fill out the rest of the second year in your term. But why leave now?
Well, that's a good question. I ask myself that every day, especially as we're busy trying to pack and sort through stuff. And I said, why are we doing this? But the reality is, we had thought at some point we might move a little closer to some of the family, and we knew at some point we needed to probably find. We love our home. We had it built. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's got a lot of charm to it. It's built around an old barn beam, post and beam, but it's not, quite frankly, senior friendly. It works fine for us now, but 10 years from now, maybe it won't work too well with multiple levels and stuff. So at some point we needed to make a change, and as it just turned out, things just sort of fell into place. And the first people that a young couple that looked at our house, actually the ones that put in an offer and are purchasing it. So we did not expect that. We expected that, perhaps we'd not have it on the market in the winter and put it back on the spring, but it didn't turn out that way. So we had to make some quick decisions to go forward. So my preference would have been to stay through the term. That's what I was elected for. It didn't work out that way. I'm sorry. But Vermont will do just fine. I'm only one of 150 people in the House. So
you're going to be moving over to New Hampshire. So you're going to run for the state office over there?
Probably not.
Well, they could probably use you, I think.
It's like I said, I've enjoyed the participation and the process. I can't imagine what it's like serving in New Hampshire. We have 150 in our House, and I think that's a lot. The average around the country is like 105 in their House. And there's some advantages to that because we have small districts, relatively speaking, and it's easier for people to get access and to give input to their elected representative. But in New Hampshire, their House is 400 people, by far the largest in the country. I can't imagine serving in that many people, but they do it. So,
well, I guess if it works, it works. So that does sound like an awful lot of representatives for a state about the same size as Vermont.
right.
Well, I guess I was thinking. I think it was during the 2022 election cycle, or after that. About 1/3 of the House and Senate members from the Vermont Legislature opted not to seek re-election. And I don't know what the comparable numbers were for the 2024 election cycle, but it seems like I read more about legislators, state senators, state representatives, stepping back from running in the state, staying in the state house. Is that your sense of things, or is it just the same?
A third is high. We had about a third this past election, 2024. Some of that was because of a large number of seat changes. I think people said loud and clear they weren't happy with the direction of property taxes and a few other issues related to affordability. So that's probably a little higher than average. I would say probably you can expect 20 to 25% each election cycle to change. Vermont has a citizen legislature. It's part-time. I mean, it's full-time more or less from January to mid-May, but in the scheme of things, it's part-time. It's a citizen legislature. And I think that in itself leads to some natural turnover. It's not a career, and people have other things going on with their life. And, quite frankly, I think there's some positive aspects of that. I don't understand Washington, how it works. I could probably never go down there and do what they do. But they don't quit. A lot of them just, go there and get reelected and reelected and reelected. And life's too short. I find something else to do. But at the local level, I think, a lot of people talk about term limits. You don't really need term limits when you have a citizen legislature because there is that natural turnover.
What do you see as some of the challenges that face people who want to serve in the State House, want to be a legislator, get elected? I mean, it's not a well-paying job. You're not going to get rich doing that. And if you don't live close to Montpelier or within driving range, you're basically living up there 4 or 5 days a week for 5 months or so. Most people probably need to have another job doing something. If you're not old and collecting Social Security or retired or just financially well off. And right there, that kind of eliminates a big chunk of the population from even being able to realistically think about serving. But beyond just the salary, are there other challenges that make it a difficult job to do?
Well, I think the time involved is going to be a limiting factor. Even if you're, working and have full-time employment for your means of putting food on the table, it doesn't mean that you're already going to have the flexibility. I know of a couple people who had expressed interest when the word was out about me stepping down, but then opted not to put their name in the hat because their work commitments were, too much right now, and they didn't think they could balance both. So it's not the time commitment is a challenge. I don't know how to get around that other than focus on what we need to focus on and not try to solve every single problem of the world in 5 or 6 months. I mean, at one time, the legislature, would be done in March or so. I'm going back many, many years ago. And life's more complicated certainly now than it was then. But if you focus on what you have to focus on, maybe you can streamline it and do it quicker. Some states in their constitution, they will meet for 60 days, period, or 90 days, period. We go on sometimes close to 5 months. So now they may do committee work outside of that 60 or 90-day constitutional limit, and I don't really know, but you can. We need to be more efficient with everybody's time to get things done.
And I'm thinking also that even after the legislature adjourns in May or June, whenever that usually happens, you're still a state legislator, and I imagine that select boards want you to come and sit in at their meetings and kind of hear from you about what your thoughts are on one issue
Sure.
or another, or there's events of one kind that kind of claim time. Is that the case, or am I just imagining?
It's definitely the case. I mean, you know when you sign up, you're busy from January to May. Most legislators have Mondays off, but Mondays are usually filled, at least Monday morning, with a local meeting. It might be the local hospital, it might be the chamber, it might be the home health agencies in your area. So a lot of them want to make sure that they keep a line of communication with their area legislators. And so a lot of that takes place, but a lot of it takes place off session too. In the fall, especially gearing up for a new session, there's a number of meetings with various groups in your particular county. So, and that's part of the education and communication, back and forth. You have to understand what, different groups are looking for and how we as a legislator can help those in our area. So there is a time commitment. It doesn't mean you have to do everything, but, it's a little bit like school. Some students work really hard. They do a lot of homework and they get a lot out of it. Some coast. They do what they have to do, but no more, no less. And being a legislator, I'm sure there's some of that as well. You can tell some work really, really hard at what they do, and do a lot of extra work, and try to research bills and whatnot. And others are there and, vote yes or no on each issue that comes through, but, haven't done the homework. That's up to the voters to sometimes sort through that and elect people who are going to work for them.
Right. Right. Well, I was wondering, you started in 2017, 9 years ago. Have there been any differences in the way the legislature works or the way, representatives kind of interact with each other? I mean, we hear so much today about, polarization and political differences and how hard it is for people on one side of the aisle to talk to the other in a sort of a civil, productive kind of way. Has any of that impacted work in Montpelier? I mean, or is it still the case where, everybody understands, well, we're all Vermonters, and while we may have different points of view or different opinions on things, ultimately we all want to get to the same place. It's just a question of how we get there.
Yeah, I think there's certainly different opinions. We all come from different areas of the state. We're representing different constituencies. Each of us bring to the table our different life experiences. And, all of that shapes, where we view different issues, that are before us. So, there is that. But I do maintain we can get along, and we can develop that communication. I'll give you a case in point. As you mentioned earlier, I serve as the vice chair of appropriations. There's some benefit to having, I'm a member of the minority party, so there's some benefit to having someone in the minority party to be part of that process and leadership in the committee. I looked around the committee at the beginning of the room, and I know my colleagues, and I've known them for, none of them are new. I've known them for several years, and I know where they kind of philosophically come from. And I looked at, wow, I don't know how we're going to ever get to a budget where we can all support it. Well, by golly, we did. I may have been the hardest person there to get to yes, but we got to yes. At the end of the day, it passed the House 138-3, I think was the final number. So you can make compromises, and you can do it if everybody's motivated to do that. Are there some things that I would have done differently in the budget? Absolutely. And there's some things some of my more liberal friends would have done differently and spent money in different areas than I would have. So, but we did it. We got through it. We can do it. One of the things that was kind of really disappointing, and I'm glad we have a little bit more balance, because that kind of forces those compromises and conversations. 2 years ago, we didn't have that. The majority party had enough votes to override vetoes, and they did. And as a consequences, some of those compromises weren't made. And I think that was a mistake in my view. And I think some people lost re-election because of that. But nonetheless, we're in a place now where we have a little bit more balance. We can get along. We have to get along. Doesn't mean we always have to agree. There are certainly votes that people might, they're stuck in a certain way, and we're not going to compromise. But more the things that count, we have to figure that out.
You raised some interesting points there, but before we get to those, I guess I'm just wondering, even though you're not going to be part of the action in Montpelier this year, as you look ahead to some of the issues facing your soon-to-be former colleagues, what stands out? I mean, education seems to be a red-hot issue all around the state, housing and sort of affordability in general. Is that your take on things, or there were some other issues that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the budget, is going to be get increasingly tightened. The revenues, the last couple months, we've been blessed ever since the pandemic, where revenues, which is primarily driven by the personal income tax, have exceeded expectations, which has led to surpluses and has led to the ability to, and like last year, buy down property tax rates that would have been higher had it not been for that. And the last couple months, the revenue has been slowing a little bit. It's still good, but it's not as good as it was. And in addition to that, going forward, Vermont gets about a third of its overall revenue from the federal government. The biggest part of that being Medicaid. And the bill that was signed back in July, I guess, in Congress in Washington, is going to have some reductions in that going forward. And so that's going to create some fiscal pressures. And we've already started hearing from various advocacy groups that, whether it's Section 8 housing, that, they're not getting the same federal support that they perhaps were getting, or, some of the food stamp benefits, SNAP benefits, maybe get trimmed a little bit. All those are going to put pressure. We know, obviously, about the healthcare subsidies and credits on the exchange. All those are going to create pressures in Vermont. What can Vermont do to help, knowing that, we don't have bags of money somewhere that we can just tap into? So that's going to create a challenge. You mentioned education. If there's one issue that all of us have heard over and over again, it's the high cost of property taxes. And, what a lot of that's driven by the cost of education. And we have a system for education, that was built for, say, 120 or 125,000 students that could handle that easily. But yet we're down to closer to 80,000 students because every year has been a decline a little bit. So that's a lot of overhead for fewer students. And, Vermont is the size, total population is about the size of Boston. Yet, so we're a small city or a medium-sized city. Yet we have 52 supervisory unions. That's 52 superintendents, that's 52 curriculum directors, 52 business managers, 52 offices. That's not teachers in the classroom. That's not, busing your students to the local school. That's a lot of overhead. So we have to look at some of these things and saying, okay, if we can't change the demographics, get 125,000 students tomorrow, we got to start looking at our costs, or we're going to just price ourselves out because no one would be able to afford the property taxes. I'm sounding negative. I don't mean to. So,
I guess I just wondered, one last thought. Last year, it seemed like relations between Governor Scott and the legislative leadership on the Democratic side anyway, seemed to kind of hit a bit of a low point. Do you think that there's a desire on both sides to kind of start from a better place this year?
I think you started to see that last year, given the new dynamic. The legislature could not, without Republican help, which it was probably not likely to override vetoes. So I think the governor vetoed a total of 5 bills. Overrides were not attempted on any of those. They were received back and sent to a committee where they, quietly sit. So I think in recognition of that, I think the leaders, from what I see, the Senate President Pro Tem and the House Speaker have, one, had more conversations with the governor. I think that's a good thing. And when they really needed to, they got together. There was a time last spring, for example, when there was some real question whether the education reform bill was even going to get out of the House. Um, it was written at that stage primarily with Democratic support, and but yet there were still some Democrats that weren't going to support it. And there was a question whether there's going to be enough votes. And I remember the governor coming over from his office at the Pavilion Building to the Statehouse and calling a meeting with the pro tem and the speaker to try to figure out how do we go forward to keep the issue alive and keep the conversation going. And then reached out to House Republicans to make sure we had enough votes to pass it, to keep it going. It wasn't the final bill. You know, it's a work in progress. So I think there's a lot more of that because there has to be. There has to be. And I think that's a real good thing. No one has all the answers up there. We got to work together to find them.
And just before we have to run here, one final thought. Vermont used to be considered one of the most bedrock Republican stronghold states in the country, basically, until 1962, was it, when Phil Hoff was elected governor? It was the first time a Democrat had been elected to the governorship, I think, in over 100 years. The state routinely voted Republican. It was one of two states that voted against Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. But more recently, the Republican Party has been in the minority in the Statehouse. Do you see that changing at all, or anything that would indicate that there would be more of an equal balance, like a 50-50, close to a 50-50 split? I know, as you said, in the 24 election, the former supermajority the Democrats enjoyed, was diminished, and they no longer had the supermajority. But do you see any kind of trend or likelihood that?
You know, it's hard to go forward. Vermont is definitely a blue state, by any measure. When you look at presidential elections, Vermont's the first state called for the Democratic candidate. And the last couple, the margin in Vermont has been highest for the Democratic candidate. Now, that could be a reflection of the state's politics. It could also be a reflection of the Republican candidates that have been put forth. I don't know. But I do know the last election, while Kamala Harris won Vermont by almost a 2-to-1 margin, maybe not quite that, but darn close. At the same time, Republicans in the legislature picked up something like 25 seats between the House and the Senate. Governor Scott, a moderate Republican, by any polling that's been done in the last few years, is the most popular governor in the country. So, yeah, people do differentiate. They might vote Democratic for the top of the ticket on national level. But when the issues are closer to home, I think Republicans, especially as we continue to talk about affordability issues, will make inroads. At the end of the day, it all comes back to having the right candidates step up and run. And the Democrats have done a very good job of recruiting candidates that really want to do it, that maybe have some philosophical issues that they want to pursue, whatever the case is. But you got to have candidates. You got to have good candidates. And my hope would be that Vermont continues to strive some kind of balance. You mentioned earlier, my prior life was working for the grocers and the retailers at the Statehouse. And, we had to represent their interests and advocate on a number of different ones. My favorite time in the legislature was when it was almost split, because you won or lost based on the merits of the issue, not who was leading the charge, what party, one or the other. And that goes back, I'm old enough to remember when the Republicans had a majority in the Statehouse, but most of the time it's been a Democratic majority. So balance is good. Balance leads to good outcome. And aside from all that, get along. Just plain get along. It's not personal. We need to have a laugh with one another. We need to work with one another. And hopefully at the end of the day, we can do good things for Vermonters.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it there for today, Representative Harrison. But once again, thank you very much for making the time to be with us and share your thinking about all of that. And I guess I'll just say in conclusion, New Hampshire's gain is going to be Vermont's loss. But anyway.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's been a real pleasure, and it's been a real honor to serve at the Statehouse. I am going to miss that immensely, I know. So.
All right. Well, good luck in the next chapter.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Right. Take care.
All right.
And thanks to all of you who have been with us today as well. We'll see you again the next time. Take care.